Hello and welcome. In this video today I am just going to be showing you the basic tools you will need to knit your first scarf in the round, or for the basics for any beginner knitting project really. First of all, we're going to need some yarn, and a lot of yarns come in this sort of format, and this is a skein of yarn. Now you can't knit straight from this, it has to be wound up. So most beginners will get a ball of yarn or a cake of yarn. You can hand wind this though. So when you unravel this, it does, it's in a big circle of yarn and you need to wind that into a ball. And I'll probably show that in another video. But essentially you need some yarn of some sort. For a scarf, it's probably better to have something that's an animal fibre or like wool or something along those lines, so it will be nice and warm. You also then need a knitting needle. This is the ChiaoGoo, which is what I recommend, and it's a 16-inch. For this particular scarf that I am recommending, this is the size of needle you need. When knitting with a circular needle, you'll have your two small needles and then a cable connecting them. And this is so you can knit round and round in a spiral. The length of the cable on these needles is very important because it has to be very close to the circumference that you are knitting so that you can get those stitches round. If it's too big, you won't be able to join in the round and knit successfully in the round. If it's too tight, it'll be uncomfortable, and likewise if they're too bunched up, it won't be good. When you're knitting, you want to be able to get a smooth flow around the needles, and that will keep your stitches even. For this, it is a 16-inch or a 40cm cable that you will need. You don't necessarily need the ChiaoGoo. Any 16-inch or 40cm circular needle will work. Wood or metal, whichever you prefer to try. Metal needles have more slip and enable you to knit more smoothly and fastly, whereas sometimes wood is better for beginners because you can it grips the yarn a bit more and helps the stitches stay on your needles. The other thing that you could get for this is a beginning of round marker. Now it's not essential in this pattern because it is only a basic pattern, but it is good to get in that habit, because generally for most patterns where you're knitting in the round, because you're just knitting in the spiral as we've discussed, you do need to know where your beginning of round starts. Now these light bulb stitch markers are fantastic for beginners. You can use them for lots of things, marking in your patterns, all that sort of thing, marking your knitting for certain things in patterns, and you can also count rows and mark them every 10 rows, things like that. But you can also use these for your beginning of round marker. So I highly recommend that you have some of these on hand. It will just make your life so much easier. Can also be used as a small cable needle if required. Now I just wanted to show you this as well, because this is also a beginning of round marker. Now this is a closed ring, as you can see, and not essential but nice to pretty up your knitting, but it does the same job as this will, but this has more uses for beginning knitters. Also, another thing that I would highly recommend, especially when you're first knitting in the round, is these, and these are needle stoppers, and I'll just sort of show you on here. They just go on the end of your needles when you are putting your knitting away for the day, and just stops any stitches falling off. It's quite common when you're first knitting and learning to knit that you do end up dropping stitches off your needles. This will stop you getting into a mess when you leave your knitting and come back to it to discover that 10 stitches have fallen off, and that's not a nice thing for anybody. As you become more experienced, you will be able to deal with that a lot better, but when you're first learning the basics, definitely need some of these. You don't need anything fancy. Again, you can get something more. These were just off Amazon. They do the job. And so that's the beginning essentials that you need. Basically, it's these two to actually be able to cast on and start. So, as I was explaining in the last video about yarn and how you will buy your yarn, a lot of them will be in skeins like this, and you can't knit from this. So I thought I'd better, just for anybody who's a total newbie, never knit before, I'd just explain. This is a skein of yarn, which, as I said, you can't knit from. This is a ball of yarn, and these can be knit from straight away. You don't need to do anything with those. But if you do get a skein of yarn and you want to wind it, you can use a Swift and ball winder. But if you're new to knitting and you don't know if you're going to enjoy knitting or not, then that's highly unlikely that you're going to invest in those two pieces of equipment. So as I've said, you can wind it into a ball of yarn, and this is what it would essentially look like, just a lot bigger. This is a small one that I've just used in a sock I've just knitted, or doing it on a winder is like this into a cake. Some yarn stores will actually wind it into a cake for you, so if they offer that service, that's fantastic. I know some of the online stores, I think Tangled Yarn in the UK does that, but I'm sure that some of them do, and if you ask them, I'm sure they won't mind doing that for you. So skein of yarn, which you can't knit from, that's a cake, that's a hand wound ball, and this is a ball of yarn. Quite a lot of commercial yarns, sock yarns, are like this, and they might be a good starting point because it's easier for you to knit from straight away without any of the worry about getting this into a form that you can knit.